Mega Evolution, easily one of Pokemon's most beloved mechanics. It gave new life to forgotten Pokemon, made fan favorites even cooler, it even carried an entire generation on its back. However, GameFreak kept trying and failing to top it over and over again, with fans begging them to bring it back. Well, after years of begging and the disaster that was Scarlet and Violet, they finally listened and are bringing them back in Legend ZA. So to celebrate, I decided to do something insane and hunt down every shiny Mega Evolution. Yes, even the new ones in Legend ZA. You see, a while back it was leaked which Pokemon were to get Mega Evolutions in this game. And since the trailers confirmed them to be true, I decided to hunt them down. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nosum, are you really going to waste hundreds of hours hunting these guys? And the answer is, not really. If you've been watching my live streams, then you know I use this technique called RNG manipulation to get most of my shinies. Without overcomplicating it, computers can't truly produce randomness, they can only simulate it. You're basically controlling the randomness to get a desired outcome. It's kind of like time travel from Endgame, but instead of trying to bring back those who turn to dust, I'm trying to catch shinies. Now, most of the footage from this video is from an emulator, as the only way to record footage from the DS is either from a new 3DS, which is something that I don't have, or get a capture card installed. Not that it mattered since I had to change DS's multiple times in order to RNG manip. I could have recorded footage from my phone, but I don't think any of you guys would have liked that. I mean, come on, do you really think this is acceptable? The comment section would eat me alive! Sadly, I did catch most of the Megas in the DLC as I was away when the game got data mined. Funnily enough, I did manage to get a shiny Zeraora, as according to early reports, its Mega would be in the base game. I decided to start my hunt with the Johto remakes, as surprisingly, you can get most of the Megas in these games. Whenever you select your profile in these games, you generate a seed. This determines what Pokemon you can catch, and in Generation 4, there are 3 factors that determine it. What time you boot up the game, the delay, which is just how long it takes you to select your profile, and your name, which determines if you can hit even or odd delays. To figure out and help me keep track of everything, I use 2 tools, Eon Timer and PokeFinder. Eon Timer to help me time the delays and when to boot up the game, and PokeFinder to help me find the shinies. You also need to know your secret ID, as that is crucial to getting shinies. And the best way to do that is by starting a new game. So off I was, starting a new game in my copy of Pokemon Soul Silver, and to begin my quest to get every shiny Mega Evolution, starting with Totodile. In order to RNG the Johto starters, you need a specific pair of trainer and secret IDs, as well as take a specific route for the starter you want to be shiny. However, I immediately started running into problems as my delays were off. Sir, I was off by like 4 delays, which was to be expected, but when I went to adjust, I was off by way more. So what was going on? Without getting overly complicated, RNG manipulating these games on the 3DS is pretty messy. Upon realizing this, I ditched my 3DS and started hunting on my DSi, where I started to get much better results. And after about 4 attempts, I got the IDs I needed and took the necessary path to get my shiny Totodile. I also started a new copy of Pokemon HeartGold and managed to get the IDs I needed on my first attempt, thus allowing me to get shiny Chikorita. That's only 2 Pokemon down and only 75 more to go. Yay! So now I can use RNG Manip to get the other shinies, right? Not exactly. You see, in order to successfully RNG Manip in these games, I need 3 things. 1. A Pokemon that knows Sweet Scent, which I can easily get in Ilex Forest. 2. Juggler Irwin's number, as in order to RNG Manip, you need to advance a certain number of frames. And the best way to do that in these games is by harassing this poor juggler over and over again. I also need Entei and Raiku's location registered on my map card. Meaning, the earliest I can start RNG manipulating is by Ecruteak City. And so, I had to beat my rival, stop whatever Team Rocket was doing in Slowpoke well, and deal with Whitney's demonic Miltank! With all that done, I can now start shiny hunting, starting with Shiny Pidgey. Should be pretty easy, right? Wrong! This bird nearly broke me. For whatever reason, I could not hit my seed. And the few times I did hit it, my frame advancements were off. Oh, and to make matters worse, when I did hit my frame, I realized I put down the wrong ID in PokeFinder. So, not only was I aiming for the wrong frame, but I also had to spend even more time trying to find this stupid golden bird. And after about 3 hours, I finally got this dumb bird. Luckily for me, after that nightmare, things started to pick up. Went to Route 31 to get Bellsprout, which only took me an hour. Weeder was on the same route, which only took me half of that. Went to Sprout Tower to get Ghastly, which only took me around 20 minutes. And finally, Route 32 for Mareep, which only took 10. After beating Morty, more of the map opened up, which meant I could get more shinies. Got the guaranteed shiny Gyarados at the Lake of Rage. Went to Cliff Cave to get Steelix, which only took me 5 attempts. Route 47 for Staryu, which I got on my first attempt. With the same being said for the Slowpoke I got down in Slowpoke Well. After progressing through more of the story and beating Claire, I was able to get my next batch of shinies. You see, early on in my playthrough, I caught a Zubat, hoping to evolve it into a Crobat to learn Mean Look. This was to stop a few Pokemon I needed from fleeing, with one of those Pokemon being Abra, who's infamous for fleeing at the first line of sight. And so I went to Route 34 and after a few minutes managed to get my shiny. Skarmory was next, which was on Route 45. Funnily enough, I encountered it on my first attempt, but sadly, Feraligatr knocked it out. Hey, I wouldn't be a shiny hunter if this happened to me at least once. Luckily, it only took a few minutes for it to appear again, and I managed to catch it this time. And then it was on to the final Pokemon in Johto, the Extreme Speed Dratini that is given to you in Dragon's Den, which I also got with no issue. After beating Lance, it was time to head to Kanto to catch even more shinies. I traveled to Rock Tunnel to get Kangaskhan, Route 7 for Houndour, and Mount Moon for Clefairy. All took about 3 attempts. After that, it was on to Vermilion City to catch Latios. Now, trying to shiny hunt this thing is a bit tricky. The house I had to leave to trigger the encounter had a Bayleaf in it that would not stop moving, and because of that, would keep on advancing the frames. Luckily, it didn't take long before the shiny appeared. But catching it, on the other hand, was pure hell. Since it was a roamer, it would automatically flee from you. And the only way I could stop that was with Crobat, who was weak to psychic type attacks. Now, this wouldn't be a problem since I had a ton of full restores. The problem was simply trying to catch it. Legendary Pokemon in the older games are hell to catch. Sometimes you'd have to reset just because you ran out of balls. There were even stretches where the ball didn't even shake. I swapped to Dusk Ball since they have a better catch rate at night, but I barely noticed the difference. I swear, I chucked over 100 of these guys at it before it was finally mine. And so, after that whole ordeal, I went back to the Ruins Valve to find an old Amber to revive an Aerodactyl. I thought this would be brutal since it required using Rock Smash in the hopes that the rock I destroyed would drop an old Amber. But surprisingly, it only took me 5 minutes for me to get one. In all honesty, it took me longer to RNG manip for the Aerodactyl than for me to get the old Amber. Then it was time for Heracross. Now, I was putting off hunting for this guy since I didn't know anything about Headbutt RNG, but after doing some research, it was pretty similar to Wild RNG. In order for this to work, I had to find a tree that had Pokemon in it, and after a few minutes, I found one. So I did the manip and got a shiny Spearow instead. Not exactly what I was aiming for. Turns out, certain trees house certain Pokemon. So after finding a tree that had a Heracross, I did the manip again and managed to catch it. After beating Blue, I unlocked Mount Silver and was able to get Pupitar. But for some reason, when I did the manip, I got a shiny Misdreavus. I thought I'd catch it since, hey, it's a shiny. However, it knew Parasong. No big deal, after all, it's a Misdreavus. How hard could it be to catch? Why are so many Pokemon in this game so fucking difficult to catch? After that incident, I was determined to get the shiny Misdreavus. I manipped for it and got a Teddiursa. Okay. I did the same thing I did when I was trying to get Pupitar, and sure enough, shiny Misdreavus appeared. And this time, I was able to catch it. I then decided to go for a different seed, and this time, I got a shiny Quagsire. I think there's something wrong with Pokefighter and the section of Mount Silver I was on. So I headed to a different section to get Larvitar. And within a few minutes, I got myself the shiny. I then had to face the biggest obstacle of this game, Red. However, one look at my team and you could tell I was severely underleveled. Luckily, there are 2 level 70 Pokemon I could get to fight him, Mewtwo and Ho-Oh. I had to get Mewtwo eventually, so I traveled to Cerulean Cave to catch it, and it was surprisingly tame. The same could not be said for Ho-Oh. Just like Latios, Ho-Oh was a pain to catch. It refused to get in the ball, and even knocked itself out at one point. Luckily, I managed to get it on my second attempt. And after catching both of them, it was time to take on Red. And let me tell you, this guy was a nightmare to beat, even with 2 level 70 legendaries. While I lost to him on my first attempt, I was able to beat him on my second one. With Red defeated, I was able to get both a Kanto and Hoenn starter. I chose Charmander and Trico, which weren't too hard to get. After that, I went to the Safari Zone as there were a few Pokemon I could get there. However, upon arriving, I realized I made a massive blunder. You see, the Pokemon I needed there need block items placed down in order for them to spawn. And to get them, I need to complete 2 tasks from Boba, with the second one being unlocked after 3 hours of end-game time. And once that's done, I have to wait an extra 2 hours in the hopes of getting the items I want. Like seriously, who thought this was a good idea? So I decided to leave the game running while I did other things. And once I got the items I needed, I started the hunt. There was just one problem. I couldn't save in the Safari Zone. Luckily, I had a simple workaround. You see, the Safari Zone in these games are divided into areas that you can rearrange and swap out. So I put the zone I needed near the entrance and looked for a shiny frame somewhere between 20 and 30, with my first Safari Zone hunt being Electrike. It was a bit of a pain since Pokemon there could run away from you at any time, and sure enough it did. Twice. But on my third attempt I was able to catch it. I then did the same thing for Aeron and got it on my first try. By the way, I have to commend the people that are insane enough to shiny hunt in the Safari Zone. As if I were doing that without using Orangey Manip and a shiny ran away from me, I'd break my DS. Using what I learned from the Safari Zone, I went to the bug catching contest to catch Pinsir and Scyther. Now sadly, you could only bring one Pokemon with you there, but luckily, I traded over my Chikorita from HeartGold, evolved it into a Meganium, and taught it Sweet Scent. Plus, I'm pretty sure neither of them could get OHKO'd by a grass move from this thing. And with little to no trouble, I got Shiny Scyther and Pinsir on my first attempts. However, I had to go back to the Safari Zone to get Shuppet, but I needed to wait a certain number of days to pass in order for it to appear, and thus I started fast forwarding the days. I also decided to check the radio for swarm Pokemon, since there were a few I could get through that, and soon enough, there was a Mawile swarm. It was a bit tricky to get the shiny because there were a lot of NPCs in the area, but soon enough, I managed to get it. As I was fast forwarding, I also saw that there was a Swablu and Baneri swarm, and I managed to get both without much difficulty. After enough time passed, I decided to go to the Safari Zone to get Shuppet, but it wasn't appearing. What gives? You see, the way these games check time is kinda weird. The counter for these types of Pokemon only advances if I let the game go past midnight, which is what I was doing. I even made sure to RNG for the swarm Pokemon in the same in-game day. What I did know was that the game penalized you for directly changing the date by locking all time-based events for 24 real-life hours. Which is what I was doing. I wasn't too worried about this since I was going to play Panem to get some of the shinies there anyway, with one of them being Banette. I then decided to get the final swarm Pokemon in this game, Ralts, which was a pain for me to get. I swear after about 2 hours of fast forwarding the dates, I saw every swarm Pokemon pop up on the radio besides Ralts. But after flipping through the radio some more, one finally spawned, in which I managed to get a shiny male and female Ralts for Gallade and Gardevoir. I then decided to go after the remaining shiny Pokemon in this game. Using the radio, I could get some Hoenn Pokemon, so I went to the Ice Path to get Absol and Alex Forest for Numel. Both were pretty easy to get. I then went to the Bell Tower to get Meditite, where I started encountering some problems. It took me an hour to hit my seed, and when I did, I encountered a shiny Spinda. Yeah, as it turns out, I needed to play Sinnoh music for this Pokemon originally from Hoenn. Why? Because apparently GameFreak forgot which region this Pokemon was from. But after about 30 minutes, I finally got my shiny Meditite. Then it was on to the final Pokemon, Groudon. And before you say anything, yes, I know Kyogre and Groudon don't Mega Evolve. However, since their primal forms weren't introduced in the same generation as Megas, and were removed alongside them in Sword and Shield, they're Megas in my eyes. I thought it wouldn't be too bad since it had 2 level 17 legendary. Oh great, it knows rest! Not wanting to deal with this nonsense, I decided to use my Master Ball on it. And just like that, I managed to get every shiny Pokemon that could Mega Evolve in my copy of Pokemon Soul Silver. And now it was time to move on to HeartGold. Now, this would mean I would have to play through the entire game again. And while I do like these games, I wasn't good at playing these games again after beating them so soon. Yeah, I had my Meganium from that copy, but it could only take me so far. But then, I realized something. The game checks 3 things to see if a Pokemon counts as yours. Your name, Trainer ID, and Secret ID. Normally the odds of all 3 aligning on 2 copies are insanely low. However, I was able to predict the IDs to be the same and named myself the same thing in both versions. Translation? I could trade myself a fully kitted Mewtwo to stop through HeartGold. And thus, I obliterated everyone that got in my path, destroying Team Rocket and bullying my rival into submission, all within the span of 8 hours. Once I beat Red, I went on to get some more shinies. Went to Oak's Lab to get a shiny Bulbasaur, went to Cerulean Cave to get another Mewtwo since it has 2 Mega Evolutions, and went to Saffron to meet up with Steven to get a Hoenn starter. But he wasn't there. As it turns out, I needed to trigger the Latias quest for him to appear there. And oh boy, was getting this thing to be shiny a pain! Last time I hunted shiny Latias, it almost took me 4 hours to get her! Which, at the time, was my longest shiny hunt. And here, it took me just as long, if not longer. While I was hitting my seed, I was always off somewhere between 1 to 5 frames. All because of this stupid Bayleaf! At one point, I realized that I was only hitting odd frames. And the frame that I was trying to hit was an even one. So I decided to go for an odd frame, and after a few attempts, it finally appeared. However, this still is HeartGold and Soul Silver. Meaning, I had to spend an obscenely long time chucking dusk balls at this thing before it finally sat in the ball. Latias, I hope I never have to shiny hunt you again for as long as I live. After all that hell, I went to Steven and got my shiny Torchic. I then chased down a Sableye Swarm, which was mercifully fast. All that was left was Kyogre, and since it knew a healing move like Groudon, I decided to chuck my Master Ball at it. However, this is when I hit another snag. 2 of the Pokemon I need to get in Platinum, Snover and Snorunt, are only available to the north of Sinnoh where it snows, which is the only place in the game where I can't use Sweet Scent. What's more, the only way to get a shiny Beldum in the wild this generation are through swarms, which, as you know, are a pain to reset for. I needed another way to get these Pokemon, and then I remembered EggOrange. A while back, I did a stream where I tried to catch every shiny legendary Pokemon from Sinnoh I didn't have. However, I failed because I couldn't get the hang of EggOrange to get Fione. Listen, this was easily my longest stream to date, and at that point, my brain was fried. But this time I was prepared, better well rested, and slightly less stupid. And as it turns out, EggOrange is surprisingly very easy. All you have to do is be on the correct seed when you receive the egg, and it'll be shiny. Luckily for me, Steven had a builder he was willing to trade for a fortress back in Pokemon HeartGold. And so I went to Peter's City to get a Pineco, evolved it into a fortress, and then traded it to Steven. I then put it in the daycare with the dinner I caught earlier to manage to get my shiny. I then decided to get the Pokemon card to get in the Johto game so I could breed them there. So I started a Platinum and went to round 217 to catch Snover and Snorunt. Went to the Safari Zone to catch Carvanha, used the Pokeradar to get a Bagon, hatched the Riolu I received from Iron Island, and went to Wayward Cave to get a Gibbo. The only Pokemon that gave me trouble was Banette, as for some reason I kept on encountering Pokemon that were rarer than it. But after an hour, it finally appeared. I then started using as the Pokemon Sapphire and Fire Red to get Mudkip and Squirtle. Once they were on my copy of HeartGold, I began breeding, and it was pretty straightforward. I even hatched another shiny Charmander, as just like with Mewtwo, it also has 2 megas. But then came Riolu. For whatever reason, it wasn't getting along with the Ditto. I was confused. Was this a glitch or something? Why did it get along? I then learned that it was because Riolu was in the baby egg group, and in order for it to breed, it had to evolve into a Lucario. And the only way to do that is through friendship. Yay. If you didn't know, friendship evolutions are a pain and take forever to do. But after about 3 to 4 hours of grinding, it finally evolved. From there, I dropped it into the daycare and got my shiny Riolu. All that was left was Rayquaza. This was easily one of the hardest shinies to get. Like I said, I thought I'd be playing through Platinum, so I thought I'd use the Master Ball I got there on Rayquaza. But since those plans fell through, that was no longer an option. Not only does it know Rest, but it also knows Outrage, which means it risks fainting due to hitting itself in confusion. On top of that, it knows Air Sash, which can flinch, and Ancient Power, which can offer an Omni Boost. Combine that with the horde legendary catch rate and you got yourself the Pokemon equivalent of a Dark Souls boss. It took me 7 resets of me spamming revives in 4 restores, running out of balls to throw at it, and knocking itself out before I finally caught it. Hell, not even the Alolan, one of the hardest bosses in Black Myth Wukong, gave me that much trouble. And I managed to beat that guy in 3 attempts. Meaning, a dragon from a kid's game gave me more trauma than a Souls-like boss. I think I'd rather go after shiny Latios again than even think of going after shiny Rayquaza after this. With all that said and done, I managed to get 56 out of the 75 shiny Pokemon capable of Mega Evolving. Next are the Unova games in Pokemon Black and White. RNG manip is different in these games as you need to calibrate your DS in order to pull it off. However, my DSi kept on giving me the same issues my 3DS did. So I decided to change DSs again and use my original DS. And ta-da! It worked like a charm. And yeah, this thing has definitely seen better days. Even though there's a bit of luck involved in hitting your seed in these games since what time of 0 you hit is random, it is way more straightforward, as all you need to do is boot up your game at the correct time. Once I calibrated my DS and created a new save, I began hunting for my first shiny in these games, Shiny Tepig. And after a bit of trial and error, my shiny appeared. When I heard Emboar was getting a Mega Evolution, I knew I had to name it after this legend who sadly was taken from us too soon. This guy dominated every tournament he took part of, became the #1 potato farmer, toppled the government not once, not twice, but 3 times. It managed to beat Dream in his prime. I'm talking about the one, the only Technoblade. Am I advertising Technoblade to a different community? Yes. Do I feel guilty about it? Nope. While you're at it, you should subscribe to him. I really want him to reach 30 million sometime in my life. And also, subscribe to me. It only takes a bit, and it really helps the channel out. Now let's name this guy after the legend. Technoblade. Well, that's fucked up. At least they managed to fix this murder by the time Legend Z comes out. Since I was playing through White, I thought I could get the shinies quickly since you could use the daycare after the first gem. However, the attendant wasn't there and instead was in Nimbasa City. So if I wanted to breed, I had to travel to Nimbasa. I didn't want to do that. So I started researching Gen 5 Wild RG starting with Drober since there was a cave nearby. However, it was quickly proven futile as Drober only spawned through dust clouds. And sadly, you can't manip for them. Meaning, I would have to use Egg RNG to get the shiny. So I decided to advance through the game until you get to Pinwheel Forest where you can get Venipede. But how do you advance the frames in these games? Through Chadots. Thanks to its special move Chatter, you can record audio. Once you record audio for it, each time you view it, a frame will pass. So I caught 2 Chadots in Platinum to make advancing the frames faster. Transferred them and my Odyssey to my black version, and then traded all 3 to my white version. There was just one problem. I sucked at identifying the Chatot pitches. Depending on the pitch, you can tell which frame you're on. I got around this in Platinum by seeing how many times I'd have to flip between them, but that wouldn't be the case here. You see, the tool you use to RNG manip with these games, RNG Reporter, isn't that good. Hell, just trying to figure out what Pokemon you hit with this thing is clunky. I was able to get away with it with the legendaries by looking at their natures, but I knew I wanted to be able to do that with wild RNG. Especially since there was a 50-50 chance of me hitting the correct seed thanks to the different timer zeros. And since I sucked at identifying the shout-out pitches, you can tell that this was going to be a disaster. I was getting frustrated, and after a while, I decided to test what was going on using my emulator, since you can see what's going on with the frames there. Unlike in Gen 4 where the NPCs stop if you use Sweet Scent, in Gen 5, they kept on moving if you did that. Meaning, if I wanted to perform wild RNG, I'd have to do it in a place with 0 NPCs, and the nearest place was Lost Run Forest. Now, obviously this would mean I would have gotten to Nimbasa, but at this point I was determined to get a shiny through wild RNG. And my first order of business was seeing if there was a pro game better than RNG Reporter I could use for this gen. And look, I hate to crap on it since there was a lot of effort put into it, but compared to other RNG tools like PokeFinder and 3DS RNG tool, this thing just sucks. Luckily, I did find a version of RNG Reporter made by Rambo that was more helpful. And while it isn't perfect, I was at least able to figure out what Pokemon I hit thanks to it, and after a few tries I finally got my shiny Venipede. I then decided to try Egg RNG to get both shiny Drober and Audino, and depending on how it went, I'd do the same thing with the rest. My biggest hurdle, however, was advancing the frames through the shout-out pitches. Because of the Pokemon moving in the daycare, I couldn't start on the first frame. But after searching through Smogon's forums about the topic, I found a solution. They said I should hit my seed, do one shout-out pitch, and depending on the Pokemon's IVs, use it as a base for the frame you're trying to hit. And so I did just that. But a funny thing started to happen while I was doing that. I was able to tell the shout-out frames apart, and after about an hour of trial and error, I got my shiny Drillbur. Audino was a bit of a pain since I kept on hitting the wrong timer 0, but once I did, shiny Audino was mine. And so, I decided to egg RNG the rest. Caught Scraggy, Tynamo, and Nitwick in my black version to trade them to my white version, and hatched their shinies with pretty much no issue. Now, you'd guess that my next stop would be Pokemon X and Y since most of the remaining Megas are from Kalos. However, Gen 6 is a nightmare to RNG, as in order to find a secret ID, you need to catch a shiny, and get 2 Aerodactyls to level 100 to find out what seed you're on. Yeah, not happening. So instead I went with the Gen 7 Ultra games to continue my hunt. Now, Gen 7 RNG maneuver can be confusing, clunky, and overwhelming. Especially if you don't know what you're doing. Just ask Saw and JJ when he tried to do it.
Yeah, I think I'm done for the night.
Oh man.
I was off 8,400.
Damn.
So I'm doing I might be doing something just a little bit wrong. You know, this is just a starter. This is attempt number 5, and I'm already hating everything to do with Pokemon. Everyone that's been involved in coding these creatures deserves death by electrocution. Whoever the bright mind, whoever the Einstein it was in the office at Rose's hands, like, hey, what if we make him shiny, but only 1 in a billion, so we can screw over this guy 20 years from now? It's 1998 or whatever the fuck it is. Let's make it shiny, because fuck that guy.
To be fair, your odds are better, since you actually know that you have to hit it. You have to hit.
Oh, I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit the shit out of this Pokemon when I get him.
Yeah, and you're also going to hit the shit out of so many other shinies.
Oh my, I forgot. I'm done. I can't look at this fuck.
Gen 7 RNG works very differently than Gen 4 and 5. For starters, the frames advance on their own, and the window you can hit them are extremely small. You also can't choose your seed. It's predetermined when you start up the game, and you have to use the clock hands on the profile screen to figure it out. You also have to use a different program called 3DS RNG Tool for these games, and thankfully it works much better than RNG Reporter. Normally I would create a new profile to get my secret ID, however, these are easily my least favorite Pokemon games, and so I wasn't too thrilled about playing through them again. So I thought, maybe I could find my secret ID on my current save through SOS chaining. After all, the odds are 1 in 315, so it shouldn't be that bad. However, when I opened up the tab for SOS chaining, I was instead greeted with an algebra problem! Suffice it to say, I gave up on that prospect real quickly. I instead decided to just SOS chain them to get the shinies. But there was one shiny that I could get without using SOS chaining, Barbarico. You have to play this awful Ultra Wormhole minigame to get it, which is like playing Superman 64 but with motion controls. However, the shiny odds doing this can be as high as a 1 in 3 chance, so it was worth suffering through this for a bit. And after about an hour using this method, I found my shiny Barbarico. I then started SOS chaining for Inkay, and after about 15 calls, the shiny appeared. I was ecstatic. However, I failed it in the dumbest way possible. Wanna guess how? If you chose B, then you're correct! I swear, I think I'm the first person to do this. Hell, not many people even know you could do that. I tried again, and after about 2 hours, shiny AK reappeared. Feeling confident, I decided to go after Hawlucha. However, I noticed that its allies were appearing way less frequently than with AK. I did some digging, and it turns out these games have this thing called SOS call rates, which determines how likely an SOS Pokemon would appear. While Inkay had an average call rate of 9, Hawlucha had an extremely low call rate of 3. I realized that if I wanted this shiny, I'd have to use Orangey Manip, which meant starting a new copy of Ultra Moon. How fun! However, there was one more shiny I decided to get through SOS chaining. Pyroar! Mostly because there are a lot of NPCs where it is, and in this generation, they drastically affect the frame advancement. This took me days to get. It felt like every Pyroar on the planet refused to sparkle, but eventually, one did. With all that done, I started a new copy of Ultra Moon, got my starter, cleared my first trial, and got to where Hawlucha appears. However, I started running into issues here. For some reason, the longer I waited, the more my frames would be off. For example, if I had to wait 30 seconds for my frame, I'd be off by like 10 frames. But if I had to wait 2 to 3 minutes, I'd be off by like 100 frames. I had no idea why this was the case. Maybe it was because I was using the original 3DS? I had no idea. I tried everything. And after about a week of researching, I was no closer to figuring this thing out. However, something happened that changed how I went about this hunt. You see, I'm trying to get every shiny legendary, and GameFreak announced that if you beat a certain number of the Treasure of Ruins in raids, you'd be able to get their shiny forms. Upon hearing this, I used this as a perfect excuse to start playing through Scarlet again. You see, Scarlet and Violet are notoriously easy to shiny hunt in, thanks to sandwich powers and the shiny charm. And luckily for me, I got all the runs and exclusives I needed thanks to Furfrou trades. They were all the raids since Furfrou wasn't available on any game on the Switch at the time. So after playing through the game, becoming champion, helping Arvid, and taking down the professor, I was able to complete the Pokédex. Once I got the ingredients to start making my sandwich, it was time to resume the hunt. As I was running around trying to get a shiny Hawlucha to spawn, I thought, there's no way this method could be that good, right? Oh, I was so wrong. Within 10 minutes, I repeat, 10 minutes, shiny Hawlucha appeared. I kept going. While Phoenix required me to reset my game since my sandwich power went out, I got it in no time flat on my second attempt. Scrub was a bit of a pain to hunt for. Since they're so small, it's hard to differentiate the shiny from the regular one. Although that didn't matter as within 15 minutes a shiny Dragouge appeared. Now, I would have to pay the Abomination Sword and Shield to get shiny Zygarde and Droppa. However, me and none of my friends got them. Between the National Dex controversy, the awful trees, and the dumb Dynamax gimmick, we were put off completely. Luckily, my good friend Wade did have a copy of Shield that he said I could borrow. However, he couldn't find it. Although I wouldn't blame him if he threw those games in the trash since that's where they belong. However, he knew how much getting that shiny was to me. And so, for my birthday, he got me a shiny Zygarde. That just so happened to be Jed! You know what? It's the thought that counts. So with shiny Zygarde out of the way, I decided to head back to Alola to get shiny Droppa. Now, the best way to get shinies in the Alola games is breeding with the Masuda method and shiny charm. I decided to use my copy of Pokemon Sun since there are few Pokemon you have to get compared to the Ultra games. Plus, it was almost completed. And so, it didn't take me long to fill in the rest. There was just one problem. In order to use the Masuda method, I needed a Pokemon from a different language. However, I did have one, which meant the only way for me to pull this off was to play these games in a different language and get a Ditto from there. But luckily, I didn't need to. As I was organizing my box for the Pokemon I needed to complete my decks, I saw a Emo Shogun from Japan I could use for this method. And because it and Dropper were both in the Dragon Egg group, I was able to put them both in the daycare and start breeding. I ran back and forth in the ranch, hatching egg after egg. After hatching 268 eggs, my shiny finally hatched. That just left 4 Pokemon, Shiny Diancie and the Kalos starters. There was just one problem. Shiny Diancie was only distributed once all the way back in 2013 in Japan and South Korea. Meaning, I had to do something that I'm pretty sure will piss a lot of you off. Listen, I didn't like this either. It was either do that or somehow create a time machine that just leaves the Kalos starters, which are available in the Indigo Disc DLC. But before I could do that, I had to complete the Teal Mask storyline. And thus, I had to beat the Royal 3, take a few picks with Carmine, and crush Kieran's hopes and dreams before reaching Blueberry Academy and completing the hunt. But in order to get the starters, I would have to upgrade the terrarium, and upgrading each section costs 3000 BP, meaning I would have to grind for 9000 BP. This took me hours to complete, but once I had enough, I was able to hunt the remaining shinies. My birthday was coming up, so I decided to livestream it that day. While Chispin and Froakie took me 30 minutes to get, Fennekin wouldn't be so easy. For some reason, GameFreak decided to put Fennekin near not 1, not 2, but 4 other fire types, and make it the rarest one out of the 5. This was brutal. I encountered 3 shiny Magpies and a shiny Magmar and didn't find the shiny Fennekin at all. I was at this for 3.5 hours and did get it. At this point, I knew my best shot at getting the shiny was through an outbreak. Off stream, I decided to reset for one, and once one appeared, I began to stream the hunt again. But alas, the shiny never appeared, and instead I got another shiny Magpie? Are you kidding me? I was going to be busy until Silksong released, so I didn't have much time to stream. And so I spent some of my free time doing GU raids. One day before I went to bed, I did a GU raid. And in my map, I saw a Fennekin outbreak. Seeing this, I decided to test my luck to see if I could get the shiny. And after about an hour hunting for it, shiny Fennekin finally appeared. However, my hunt wasn't over. Soon after, Pokemon announced the DLC for this game, as well as Mega Raichu X and Y. So I went back to Soul Silver and got myself a shiny Pikachu. It took a bit to get, as it's been a while since I RNG manipulated in these games. Afterwards, I realized I wanted my Mega Raichu X to know Volt Tackle. However, I needed a Pikachu to hold a light ball while breeding in order to get one. So I caught a Pikachu holding one and put it in the daycare. After a bit of trial and error, I hit my seed and got my shiny Pichu that knows Volt Tackle, thus ending my hunt and allowing me to rest. So there you have it! Every shiny Mega Evolution. Some were easy, some nearly broke me, some were Gen in, and some I hope I never have to hunt for again. All that matters is that at the end of the day, my collection was complete. Well, until the DLC releases. The only shiny I couldn't get was Eternal Flower Floette, but since there will more than likely be shiny locked until the end of time, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. This is one of the hardest challenges I've ever done in Pokemon. And outside of trying to catch every shiny legendary, I don't think I'll ever do something this crazy again. But hey, never say never. Thanks for watching. And let me know what shiny Mega is your favorite. Anyways, I'm gonna get some rest. I need it after that hunt.